Welcome back to Sleep with the Lights On. Today's episode 3, haunting encounters blur the line between belief and fear. On a desolate road, two siblings catch sight of a Wendigo, a creature both swift and unnatural, leaving them questioning the boundaries of the world they know. In the dead of night, a child witnesses a spectral figure watching over their sleeping mother, a guardian angel cloaked in unsettling familiarity, shrouded in a silent terror that lingers long after dawn. Meanwhile, a room engulfed by shadowy figures, a whispered exchange in an unknown tongue binds a soul to an enigmatic entity known only as the Hat Man, leaving behind a lingering sense of both calm and foreboding. We'll see you on the inside. But yes, to answer your question, everything is recording. As it should be. Because this is a show. And we can't do that without having things recording. You know what I mean? Folks, welcome back to Sleep with the Lights On. I am, of course...
I'm sorry.
Already.
I went to take a drink and it wasn't open, so I'm like, oh, that's going to look great on camera.
And it did. And the people are enjoying it right now. But hey, at least you didn't bump the microphone this time, you know what I mean? Baby steps.
Now that you've said that, I'll probably start bumping it again.
All the cacophony of sounds that come out of you. It's fine. Welcome back to the most popular paranormal show on YouTube.
Definitely the best.
In the future. It's not right now. And it's also probably the most unique. Why not? Who else does this, huh? Who else lazily throws together cameras and stories and whatnot for your entertainment? Oh, I know. Tons of people. But do they have our charisma?
Are you trying to get me to say Riz?
No, I was hoping you definitely wouldn't say Riz, but here we are, face to face with that, and I guess that's fine. I am once again your curator of curiosity for this evening of terror that we have planned for you. 3 interesting stories. My name is Scott, and I'm joined as always by my father-in-law, Skeptic, America's favorite wet blanket, and overall...
great guy.
I was trying to think of something that wasn't like super offensive, but like wasn't a compliment either. You know what I mean? I was trying to find some middle ground.
I know what you were doing. That's why I jumped in there.
You're like, oh, great guy.
Yeah.
Let's tickle those algorithms ourselves, huh?
Oh, we're going from the ebony keys to the algorithms.
Christian, it makes me uncomfortable. You keep saying ebony keys. I don't know where you got that, but you should probably keep it to yourself.
Sounds like a band name.
That would be the other name, the Black Keys. But
I know, but this is like the Walmart.
No, this
record.
Is a cover band of the Black Keys. We're the Ebony Keys. It's fine. This show's gotten off the rails already.
Except for that guy, he's ivory.
Are you talking about me?
Just whoever doesn't look like they're Ebony Keys. That's actually would be a cool name for
Alicia Keys' baby.
Anyway. Ooh, racist.
Wow. Starting off with a bang as usual. The racism heavy. The dry humor heavier. Anyway, guys. This is, episode 19 or 20 or something like that? 19, I believe. You know how this works by now. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. We drop fresh episodes of Sleep with the Lights On every other Friday. And we want you to be a part of that. And only you can prevent forest fires. Throwing that in there while we're here. Might as well, you know?
Went from Uncle Sam to Uncle Smokey.
I know, immediately. What a transition.
Let's see Uncle Tom.
And only you, wow. No. and only you can get me out of this. Anyway, find us on social media at Freaky Deaky Pod. You guys, God, I'm so tired of repeating myself, but that's what happens
when you have a toddler
and when you have a show on YouTube.
Same thing.
And a podcast that comes out every Thursday called the Freaky Deaky, wherever you get your podcast. Excuse me. This first story, let's just get into this. You know what I mean? What are we doing here? You know, this is what we're here for. Let's just get into it. I'm just
waiting for the stories. And
the story number 1 is called Wendigo, Wheredyago. Classic me, honestly, when you sit and think about it. And it's by Silent Shitter.
I feel like Wendigo, where'd you go is never really a term you should use if the lore is true about speaking the name.
Unless you're lovers. You didn't think about that? Maybe it's a sad song about Wendigo romance.
I did not think of that, thank God, because I don't want to think about Wendigo romance.
Well, did you think that maybe it's going to be the title of our first children's book when we release it?
Sounds hideous.
Well, that sounds judgmental, Christian. How dare you? We probably have some hideous people listening right now. Well, I guess you're watching this, unless you're doing dishes or something, and we're just on in the background. And hey, you missed a spot. This first story is by Silent Shitter, and Shitter is spelled SCHITTER, so that's not what you're thinking about, you perverts. Disgusting degenerates, all of you. Let's get into it. Wendigo, where'd you go? My brother and I believe we saw a Wendigo growing up. Where'd you go? No. Growing up, we would run and bike on our road after school. Our road was a dead-end road, so nobody ever drove down unless it was the mailman or someone living there. To do a whole lap was about a mile. There was one stretch of the road that was empty, with one side of the road having pretty thick woods and the other being an open field but with really tall grass that came up to the waist. This stretch was maybe a third of a mile. I'm not sure, but it was quite a distance between the two houses on either end of the stretch. One afternoon, as we started running, we had just passed the house marking the beginning of the stretch when we saw something move from the field into the woods. It was super fast. I've never seen anything move that fast in my life, and it was on two legs. Your skepticism is showing, Christian. It was on two legs, but it wasn't a human. The center of balance was off. It reminded me of how a bear may run, but it was much skinnier than a bear, and there was no way a bear could move that fast on two legs. It definitely wasn't human, though. My brother saw antlers on its head, but it definitely wasn't a deer either. A deer can't run for 50 yards on two legs. Whatever it was, it went into the woods and didn't make a single noise. We turned right around and went home for the day. We never saw anything like that again, but I swear that if my brother hadn't been there, I would have thought I was imagining things.
The antlers thing always fascinates me.
Why's that?
Because it's such an old thing that people have seen.
Antlers, yes.
Things on two legs with antlers throughout history. I mean, there's even, pagan gods that resemble that.
That is true.
Maybe things like the Wendigo or like the Skinwalker are from a distant past, maybe even in Asia that just followed them over.
Maybe even in Asia.
You look at the origins and then you trace the stories back. A lot of those stories will come out of Asia, but also Europe has a bunch of stories with antler beings. I don't know what else to call them.
Antler beans works, yeah.
Yeah. It's better than hoof beans. I don't know what that is. I don't know. That did cut that, Scott.
Leave that in. Let him feel his pain. No. So what you're saying is you believe in Wendigos?
I believe
in the ancient past.
There's a reason that these things with antlers keep coming up. I just don't know what that reason is.
Yeah. Well, there are stories, obviously, of, deers that are on two legs that, have whatever eating their brain. They smash their head against rocks, do weird shit all the time. But in an instance like this, when it's running 50 yards, 150 feet on two legs, a deer, I don't know, too thin to be a bear. It's got antlers on its head. There's a lot of mysteries out there. And granted, Wendigo stories are a little less common than, say, skinwalkers or even like Bigfoot, other cryptids and stuff like that. Dogman, even, there's a ton of stories that I just feel like I don't really hear a lot of Wendigo stories.
Well, I was going to mention too that Wendigo is more like the eastern United States and Canada. I think it's more of a northern, like we grew up in the area where skinwalkers supposedly inhabit.
Supposedly.
The death.
Really hard, supposedly.
Yeah, so we grew up in that area. So maybe we heard about it more. Maybe there's more Wendigo stories than we've come across so far.
Yeah, it would be really interesting to look into. Have we done a Wendigo episode?
No, but I was just reading something about them a couple days ago. So maybe it's about time.
Yeah, it might be about time to do that.
It's about time to learn about Wendigos.
Let's get into the second story before Christian bores us to death.
With Wendigo stories?
Sure.
How could you be bored with Wendigo stories?
It's not that. It's usually the anecdotes that come along with it. This next story is called Guardian Angel Mom, and it's by Noriginator.
This one's definitely fake.
Oh. Anyway, it says, I have only told a few people about this, and as I got older, I've kind of kept it to myself.
Oops, we're going to screw that up.
Okie dokie. I haven't talked about it in years. When I was 9, maybe 10, I got really scared trying to sleep one night. So I ran to my mom's bedroom and told her I couldn't sleep. I stayed with her that night. It must have been a couple hours later I was awoken by a bright light in her bedroom. My mother did not wake up. I looked over her shoulder and I saw a white figure kind of hovering over her or right next to her. I do not remember seeing wings, but she appeared to be female and looked exactly like my mother, but years younger in appearance. She had her hands folded and she was smiling down at my mother. She then looked at me and smiled at me. I did not get that feeling of calmness. I felt terrified. I remember rubbing my eyes really hard and burying myself under my mom because I was scared. I didn't want to look up again, but I needed to know if this was real or if I was just imagining this. I slowly peeked up again, and she was there. I was scared frozen. I was too afraid to run out of the room, plus I was in the safest spot in the world, by my mom. I stayed real close to my mom and tried waking her up. I whispered, for fear of startling it, to please wake up. Wake up. I said something is here. I didn't know how to explain it. My mom just mumbled and kept sleeping. Classic. I then closed my eyes real tight and never opened them again for the rest of the night. I eventually fell asleep, and when I woke up in the morning, I avoided looking that direction entirely. I even remember putting my hand over the left side of my face as a shield to avoid looking at that side of the room. I ran out of the room and down the hall. It wasn't until around midday, maybe a few hours later, I was brave enough to look back down the hall and into my mother's bedroom again. As I brought up the courage to look back at the room, I saw a somewhat large blob of what seemed like gas. I knew then that I did not dream this. There it was, not as a figure, but as a gas-like object. I didn't bring this up to anyone, not even my family, for years. When I was about 15, my brother and I were having a conversation and we brought up our past. I mentioned this to him for the first time. What shocked me was his response. He saw it too. You know what? Why I included this particular story in this episode was because I also had a weird experience where I saw my mom, but it wasn't my mom.
Who's the other mother?
The other mother. Yeah. See, I thought it was, at the time, I thought it was like a doppelganger or something like that. Now, granted, my mom wasn't illuminated with white and looked much younger. It looked exactly like my mom when she came in my room. So I was like, oh, someone else out there had a interesting double mom experience.
Yeah. Almost sounds like a alien abduction experience where maybe they use the image of his mother to calm him down.
And it didn't work. And you're just like...
I mean, it's not going to... I mean, some kids are like, there's no such thing as two mothers in the same room.
And one that looks much more youthful and vibrant. That's definitely not a thing. Not when you got kids, it's not.
Interesting. That's a fascinating story, but it's... I don't know what to make of it.
The fact the brother saw it, like he kept this to himself for all those years, and then later he told his brother, and his brother was like, yeah, I saw it too.
It definitely wasn't a guardian angel because it scared the crap out of him.
Well, if you look historically at angel sightings, most of the time they start with fear not, which tells me it's usually pretty terrifying. Or you look at him like, oh God, what?
But not the guardian angel stories. They're a little different. They're not as scary.
Yeah.
They tend
usually
to present,
wholesome.
Yeah, other human-looking entities.
Human-looking entities, of course. I don't know, man. Strange story.
Like, what's the message here? What's
I don't
the other
anything.
mother trying to communicate? Is the other mother just, maybe we're back in the astral realm and the other mother's looking in from there? Maybe that's a possible thing.
Or maybe it's the same mother. It's just looking down at her body while she sleeps. And she's much more youthful and vibrant in the astral realm.
I mean, that would be a wholesome image to project yourself out of your body and look down and see you laying there with your kid. So I guess that would create the smiles and the
hands
glowing.
Folded over.
Yeah.
What is hands folded over? Is it this? Or is it this?
I have no idea.
Or do like rappers and be like, you know what I mean?
I was going to go with prayer, but
that's kind of what I thought, folded over. But folding implies, very professional. Folding implies something like this, you know?
Maybe.
Which would be a weird thing to do when you're looking down at your body.
I think we're talking about the wrong...
Hyper-focusing on the wrong details.
Yeah,
as is tradition.
This is a paranormal podcast, not a hand-folding podcast.
And if there is such a thing, why? You know? But that's fine. Do whatever you want to do in life, whatever makes you happy.
The hand-folding podcast where we talk to experts about hand etiquette.
Wow. The most boring thing you could think of. Yeah. So anyway, Before we get into this next story, folks, I'd like to remind you that you can send in your own story for consideration on Sleep with the Lights On to the gang at thefreakydeaky.com. Send in your personal paranormal experiences. Comment below if you just feel lazy and don't feel like emailing. Be like, hey, put this in. This is my personal story, blah, 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 whatever. Or it could find its way into a freaky listener story on our podcast, The Freaky Deaky. In the meantime, folks, we are going to catch you after a word from our sponsors. Longest pause of all time. Way too pregnant of a pause. Sorry about that. We'll see you right back here in probably 5 seconds because you're going to skip it because we know you. Why wouldn't you? You know what I mean? You got to get back to the spooky ghost nonsense.
You can skip commercials.
You sure can. Wow, you really do have a odd fascination with Judge Judy, don't you? Anyway, folks, welcome back to the show. Let's get into this third story because that's what you're here for. And Christian's weird fantasies can stay with him as the good Lord intended. This third and final story is called The Wholesome Hat Man, and it's by Lost Tribute. No, whatever. Whatever. I haven't seen Hunger Games since I was like 8 or whenever it came out, but it's fine. I'm sure it's something like that.
I'm pretty sure you weren't 8.
Well, you don't know how old I am, Christian. I'm 21. So there's that. Anyway, it goes a little something like this. One night I woke up to a bunch of black figures that I could only make out the silhouettes of. My bed was in the center of my room, and they completely surrounded me. On my left were 3 figures that had some sort of hood and robes on. I could see no eyes, but they were average height and just standing next to me watching. To my right, there was only one figure, a silhouette of what appeared to be a young girl.
So it wasn't a silhouette of a man?
No, I see a little silhouette of a man. This was a little silhouette of a girl. She was wearing some sort of dress or strange skirt. She was leaning over to me and whispering in my ear in a language that I've never heard. That was when I realized that I was replying to her in the same language.
Satan's language.
Probably. This is the most surreal part of this. I was speaking these strange words willingly, but I wasn't thinking of them. You know how you construct a sentence in your head before you speak it? That wasn't happening. I immediately, and actually I don't know that because I usually just send them, I'm like, say it now. Get it out of there. And it's usually a wrong choice. So maybe you should consider what you say before you speak, but this isn't the show for that. That's the show for my therapist to deal with, okay? And that's later, so stick with me, please. Anyway, I immediately thought to myself, wait, how long have I been talking to her? And she giggled in a strange manner. It was like her laugh echoed even though it was very quiet. That was when I looked forward and saw that there was another hooded figure standing by the foot of my bed, and just behind him, leaning against the wall, was the Hat Man. Was
he leaning like
the Marlboro Man?
That's what I was thinking.
That's the image. He was taller than everyone else and had a pilgrim-like hat on and a trench coat type Victorian jacket. I could only see the shape of what he was wearing.
Those two fashions don't really go together.
Kind of clashy, Hat Man. He's not known for his fashion choices, but I guess if people can't see the detail, who cares, honestly? It's just a silhouette anyway. It's got to look creepy. He seemed to also be amused, and I immediately realized why I hadn't been panicking. For some reason, I felt calm, harmonious. There was this feeling of familiarity, like I was among old friends. I questioned why that may be, but I couldn't care less at the moment. I was elated. As I continued to unwillingly talk to the girl, I could feel that the Hat Man was pleased, that the little girl was as well. All of that probably took place within 2 to 5 minutes of time, and then the figures started dissolving into smoky dark clouds that barely resembled the shape of their bodies. The cloud legitimately floated up and out of my room, which now seemed infinitely brighter than it had looked just moments before, as if their presence made my room much darker than it should have been that night.
It's because they're black hooded
Wow,
figures.
Racism.
It's black absorbs the light. It's going to seem darker.
Wow. There you have it, folks.
And the Hat Man was there.
Science. Anyway, I still don't know who he is or who the little girl was, but I found a Redditor who had the same experience, except the little girl was screaming in his ear and he didn't catch himself speaking a different language. Wow.
So, speaking to the Hat Man's daughter in the ancient tongue.
You know what's really weird is I had actually both the experiences. I wasn't shadow people or silhouettes or anything like that. But that whole not knowing what the language was, just hearing random words. I've had that in, I think, 2, maybe 3 separate weird experiences of mine. My mom, that I mentioned from the previous story, she opened my door and was speaking some random thing I couldn't understand. I'm like, what are you saying? What? And at some point I was like, whatever, just I'll talk to you later about it. And then there was one time that I was awoken by sounds underneath. I had like kind of like a bed that had drawers. And so half of the bed was like probably this high up, a couple feet up, with just empty space right underneath it. And I woke up to the sound of someone rustling around under there. And there's only this much space between the bed and the wall. And I kind of like peeked down and I hear the crinkling of all the trash that I have down there, obviously. And eventually like this girl kind of makes her way into the frame, like, and just kind of like peeks up and she's like giggling. And I'm like, okay. And she says something that I don't understand. And I just kind of stare at her and she says it again. And then she kind of like turns over and starts crawling back underneath the bed. And I'm witnessing this from like a space this between my bed and the wall. And I'm just like, huh.
Did you think, I see dead people?
I thought, how the fuck did this girl get underneath my bed? And also I was elated, much like this person, because she couldn't come up from the bed. It's only this much space, you know what I mean? She was trapped down there. So I went back to sleep and it was fine. But I didn't understand what she was saying. She was speaking in a language that I couldn't grasp.
Isn't there something in dreams where you can't always understand the language of certain people in dreams?
I think that's reading. I haven't heard the language thing, but I know for sure that you can't read that. Like if you try reading or something like that, it's all just weird scribbles or
because you don't have eyes.
It's like AI. It's like AI text in any art generated image. You're like, is that a J somewhere? No. But yeah, that's one way to tell if you're dreaming. It's just like, can I read that? No? Cool. Yeah. But weird story all the same, man. I've heard a couple of like Wholesome Hat Man stories, but this is one where I'm like, damn, he brought along like a group of people, 3 random hooded folks that don't say anything, just sit there and watch.
They're interns. They're training to be future Hat Man.
Yeah, they're like, you don't get a hat yet, but you can wear this hooded robe.
Yeah.
Isn't that fancy?
I mean, if it's going to be a dark entity, there has to be a hooded robe.
No, that's not always the case with hooded robes, it turns out, but we're not going to go down that path. Christian, what was your favorite story from today's episode?
I like the Hat Man one.
That was good.
It's fascinating.
I like any kind of change of pace, like, because a lot of these stories are very similar, especially Hat Man. But anytime there's like something that steps outside the normal story arch of a Hat Man encounter, you're like, oh, maybe there's more to this creepy entity than we originally thought.
I was a little worried when I heard he was wearing a pilgrim's hat.
Yeah.
It's not the best fashion.
It's a horrible fashion, it turns out, actually.
And not very intimidating.
That's the least intimidating hat. Actually, propeller beanie, least intimidating hat you can have. But
no, I would think that person was crazy to wear that kind of hat. With a pilgrim hat, I'm like, oh.
Amish,
no. The pilgrims weren't Amish.
They weren't Amish, but they had very similar hats. The only difference with the pilgrims was the buckle, and it kind of angled out a little bit. And Amish had more of a top hat? Like a shorter top hat?
I didn't know you had a subscription to Pilgrim's Fashion Weekly.
I have a subscription to Hat Weekly, actually, Christian. If you haven't noticed, I wear a hat often. And for those of you wondering, I do have hair. Jose, it's there, I promise. Man, geez.
It's pink.
It is. I've been insulted for the last time. No, now I have to grow my hair out so people can see that that I'm not balding. Hey, guys. I just like hats, okay? I don't like brushing my hair. I just like waking up, throwing on a hat, like, hey, Arnold, and leaving the house. Is that fine? This isn't how I wanted to end this episode, but turns out I got some pent-up aggression about this hair nonsense. It's okay.
They have things online for that.
This episode is brought to you by Hims, or for Hims, or for thems. For theys? What's it called now? Who cares? The show's done. Folks, comment below your favorite story of the episode, or your favorite tangent. Was there something we said that entertained you while not being spooky? Cool. That's great news. We do our best. Anyway, find us on social media at FreakyDeakyPod. Submit your stories to the gang at thefreakydeaky.com. Visit the website where you can find the dopest dope merchandising that you've ever seen in the paranormal genre. I promise you. I've seen so many paranormal shows that have the absolute worst merchandise in the world, and I am not that guy. I make it look dope. I make it look fresh. I make it look cool. I got lost in that for a moment. I got lost in the sauce there, and I need to close it out.
I was a little scared.
And he's like, oh God, it is dope. It is cool. But that's beside the point. We'll see you next time. Subscribe if you like weird shows, dry humor, and stuff that doesn't always make sense. But sometimes it does. I am not a salesperson, I'm finding. This is the opposite of what salespeople do. They go in with a plan, with a strategy, with a script.
Do they?
Sometimes.
I thought you said you weren't a salesman.
I'm not.
I've been a salesman. That's not how I did it.
Well, that proves that I'm not a salesman then, huh?
It does.
Wow, see, I did it. Look at that. Folks, sleep with the lights on, because you never know what may be lurking in...
Oh, the shadows.
Oh, the shadows. Yeah, how creepy could you make this, man? Good God. Oh, the shadows. Well, not cool.
Scary?
Oh, God, the shadows. It's not Canadian.
Be scared.